Today we're going to talk about lead exposure in drinking water throughout the United States. So the American Water Works Association estimated the number of lead service lines that are currently in use in the U.S., and it's been estimated about 6.1 million lead-containing service lines are in use today just in the U.S. This serves about 15 to 20 million Americans every single day. These will be found in houses built before 1986, and these pipes are most prevalent in old urban centers, in historic homes. Obviously, people with low pH and low alkalinity waters are also at high risk of lead exposure in their drinking water. And another area that's at high risk is small towns and rural areas, because they have less service line maintenance, less likely to change out old lead piping, and their public water treatment plants usually have less funding than larger urban centers, so that they can't do as much water chemistry management, so they may not be able to balance out the pH and alkalinity in the drinking water as sufficiently. So this map on the right shows the risk of lead exposure in different counties throughout the U.S., and it's based off of the corrosiveness of the water used, the drinking water source, along with the age of the county's infrastructure. So you can see that areas where large cities are located have higher risks of lead exposure. The Northwest and then the East Coast all are at high risk. So we've seen how lead gets into our water and the areas of highest risk, but let's see what lead can do to us. So lead is toxic in low concentrations and can bioaccumulate in our bodies and stay there for years. The primary way that the average person would get lead into their system is through digestion. There's other pathways, but those are more likely if you just work in a factory or in an area with high amounts of organic leads. Children experiencing lead toxicity can have behavior and learning problems, lower IQ, reduction in growth, hearing issues, and anemia. Pregnant women, their fetus can experience reduced growth while in the womb, and the woman could also have a premature birth if lead toxicity occurs in the fetus. After the baby's born, the infant can also accumulate lead through lactation from the mother if she has high levels of lead in her body. Adults can have increased blood pressure, decreased renal function, higher incidence of hypertension, and reproduction complications if they have low concentrations of lead in their bodies. And all of these groups can experience neurodegeneration from higher lead concentrations. The Romans understood lead toxicity and to not run their water through lead after they had used lead cups and bowls, and their people would get sick from their uses. But in the 1800s, the U.S. ignored lead toxicity in favor of its benefits, since it was just easier to run to houses, through houses, and it was less prone to pinhole leaks than iron or steel piping that they could run back then. In 1925, the U.S. Public Health Service made a non-enforceable standard for lead, which was just 0.1 milligrams of lead per liter of water. In response to this, the lead lobby, who was really rich and powerful at the time, formed the Lead Industries Association in 1928, which ensured lead use even with the mounting scientific effort, because there's just so much advertisement, like the one on the right. In some areas, they even required lead use because they thought that it was going to be a safer choice than iron or steel on their walls, since it was less likely to break and flood. So actions to stop lead toxicity in drinking water started with the 1986 Safe Drinking Water Act. It defined lead-free plumbing and prohibited further lead plumbing used in construction. It defined lead-free as 8% lead by weight in materials, which is still capable of leaching lead into water, but it was a start. It also made the EPA authority in lead regulation. In 1991, the lead and copper rule was enacted by the EPA, and it required public water systems to monitor water at the taps of the customers for pollutants such as lead. And they couldn't exceed 15 parts per billion at more than 10% at their customers' taps. If they went over this limit, the lead and copper rule required the public water systems to implement better corrosion control by, altering water chemistry or lining their pipes or replacing lead piping. In 2000, there was revisions to this rule, and it required public water systems to use the best available technology for corrosion control, and for public water systems to publish annual water quality reports for all of their customers to see what's in their water that's coming to their homes. It also required the public water systems to continually monitor water at taps even after corrosion control was implemented, to make sure that they were in compliance with all of the regulations in safe water. In 2011, Reduction of Lead in Drinking Water Act was passed by Congress, which lowered lead-free plumbing qualifications to 0.25% lead by weight, which is a lot safer and a lot less likely to leach lead into our drinking water. Even with all of this federal regulation on drinking water, we still are at risk for lead exposure. Public water systems aren't responsible for indoor plumbing, so even if they've replaced your lead service lines to your home, you could still have indoor lead piping. And lead can also be stored in non-lead plumbing like galvanized steel when it's been washed into it, and that stuff can be stored in that steel for a long time, and with fluctuations in corrosion control could release stored lead in these pipes. And this is what happened in Flint, Michigan, where they changed water sources to one that had a lower pH, was more corrosive to the piping, and it released all this lead into people's waters. And this could happen in any town that has homes and water lines that are older than 1986. If they have a severe drought, they have to go turn to different water sources. If they start pumping up groundwater and it turns out to be more corrosive, they could end up with similar problems like Flint, Michigan. So more things need to be implemented at a household-to-household level. A large-scale solution would be EPA could enforce heavier restrictions and regulations on consistent water chemistry and corrosion control at the public water treatment plants. Opposed to this would limit further leaching from lead piping and from galvanized metals. Less likely that lead would be released from piping, giving us more time to change out pipes or just live with the ones we currently have. Problems are it'd be difficult for smaller systems to maintain this consistent water chemistry and corrosion control. It can be really expensive, and like I said earlier, if they have to change water sources, it could be unfeasible with their budgets to maintain water chemistry, and they may end up being more hurt by the EPA punishing them for these reasons. A household-to-household solution would be homeowners could inspect and replace indoor plumbing, lead pipes and just pipes that were made before these stricter lead-free definitions were enacted. This would be a permanent solution to this problem, and lapses in corrosion control would have less impact on the household, since they just wouldn't have any lead sources after their service lines if those have already been replaced. The problems with this solution are it'd be extremely expensive and a really extensive, long process, since walls would have to be cut into. There's just a lot that would go into changing out water piping, and people really can't, no one wants to live without water straight to their home for any amount of time. And if service lines and water mains contain lead, then this wouldn't really help limit exposure to lead at this household. So this would really only be like a final step to seal off the entire lead problem after service lines and water mains are made lead free. In my opinion, the best solution, at least temporarily while service lines and water mains can be replaced and corrosion control can be better implemented, would be for homeowners to do research on their individual household for their household lead exposure risk and filter residentially. They'd only need to filter drinking water faucets, because that's our primary way of absorbing lead into our bodies. Dermal exposure in drinking water isn't a risk with lead, so we would only filter the sinks and stuff that you drink from. The ones you wash your hands in and your shower wouldn't need to be filtered. And these filters can be relatively cheap. Like this one I just found on Amazon really quickly. It's only $16. And the filters will last you a couple months. That's a problem with this solution, though, is filters would have to be replaced every couple of months. And low-income households may not be able to filter all of their drinking water. And so some people don't ever want to spend any more money on problems like this. So it's really only a household-to-household solution that you'd have to be kind of on top of and do your research to make sure the filtration equipment that you buy can actually efficiently remove lead from your drinking water.